I'm eliminating ultra-processed food that melts in your mouth, not in your hands. I'm eliminating animal protein at this point in time. I'm eliminating most of the hard fats, whether or not it's saturated fats from plants or if it's from animals too as well. The oils, I'm minimizing those as much as possible. I am increasing my vegetables, my cruciferous vegetables. I'm increasing in terms of my legumes. I'm increasing my whole grains and the berries and seeds too as well to make sure I'm getting omegas inside the system. Now, once I'm doing that, that has to be matched from a holistic perspective, as you mentioned, to outdoors. I need measured amounts of sunlight. Why? Well, because we understand that sunlight will release the dietary nitrate stores that are underneath the surface there that can help not only trigger vitamin D, but also dilate the vessels and help alleviate aspects there. Once I do that, I'm working on their sleep too as well, understanding the relationship between the stress hormones, the insulin levels, the ghrelin, the leptin. I'm working on that component, ensuring as we're working through this process, I'm getting them engaged in light activity. If their blood pressure is up as a manifestation of the cardiovascular disease, I'm having them do isometric exercises. That means they're plank, the wall sits that are there periodically in order to kind of help. That's been shown to reduce the blood pressure almost instantaneously. So once I do all those things, now I'm reassessing, right? So I'm planning, I am executing, I'm analyzing, and then I will adjust. What else needs to happen after that point? So those are the four pillars. You plan, you execute, you analyze. That analyzing means I need to inspect what I expect. Then I adjust accordingly. Now we're figuring out, are there additional supplements that are needed? Or do we have to fine tune what types of foods and increase the amount of the fiber rich foods and ensuring that they're getting 40 grams of fiber in daily or 50 grams, depending on their man or woman. I'm going down that avenue that's there. And that's typically been my pathway for those patients who are fully on board. Now, once we've done that, the other caveat I'll leave with this is it depends on how they're presenting. Are they presenting in the throes of an acute heart attack, or are they presenting as an elective patient? That will determine the full gamut of what I throw at them versus if we have time to really take our time and go. My goal is to lower the risk first, lower that risk first while we increase all the lifestyle and then take off whatever pharmaceuticals if I have to or any other additives at that point. But my goal is to lower that risk as quickly as possible to give them the best chance.
And let me ask you this. If someone from all your years of experience and everything you've read, both of you could answer this. When people do everything you're saying, what percent do they still have of having a heart attack or stroke? So out of, how much of a reduction in risk will they have if they do everything you're saying? How much of a reduction in heart disease, heart attacks, heart disease, let's say heart attacks and strokes, if they do everything you say? Will they reduce it 100% like Caldwell Esselstyn says and be heart attack proof? Or will they only reduce it 20%, 50? Like if we do it perfectly, what's the benefit? How much do we get? How much of a reduction in death?
So I'll jump in first. I don't actually have hard numbers that I can track and report out to you. What I could say, I'm very cautious at ever saying that anything on life is 100%, just from experience in life. Everyone is unique in their experience, their body, genetics, everything of that sort. But what I can tell you is, if I'm looking at everyone doing everything, that needs to reflect and pan out to all their markers, their risk markers, have to all bottom out. If we look at the decreasing of their risk factors, as studies have shown, we know there's going to be a substantial lowering of their risk of cardiovascular events across the board, right? That's what I need. But for me to say, just putting you on the diet alone, that it's going to guarantee it's going to drop it, I need to know how you respond as an individual to that in order to really make that as objectively as possible. And even when that's said, even if I told you it's 50%, 45% reduction, 60%, there still is a 40%. It's never 100%.
Yeah,
because life exists.
I agree. Yeah, I'm going to say, and just like I'm throwing numbers again, they're not data. This is like what we're saying. It's about 80% reduction out, and even up to 90% reduction. But that's getting everything right, like checking inflammatory foods, balancing any kind of microbiome imbalance. Eating plant-based. Getting the nutrition optimized. But the biggest challenge, like I think why it's not 100%, even when Esselstyn says that, I think that's a little bit that's just to get the idea of how important this is. Don't get me wrong. But the biggest challenge that I see right now is the stress level, right? Because everybody right now can be plant-based. Everybody can watch these programs and all. But if they had any money in a 401k this past 2 weeks, a lot of people were having chest pain, right? Or a retirement fund or whatever, right? Stress can cause heart disease in that level, right? Emotional stress, psychological stress, the financial stress, right? So that is something that I find is I think the challenge going forward now in time because there's certain things like, hey, you can eat better, but market going up or going down or a tariff cost, like this is the other things that affects everybody. Whether where you live, like things are more expensive, that adds an extra burden. And then the lower the income that we have, or the poorer the state, or the income that we have, that's a higher burden of us having to pay more. So that's another stressor on top of causing more inflammation. So I think moving forward, we have to look at becoming more resilient to the stress. Because I always tell people, first thing to do is just stop eating things with mothers and faces as much as you can. If it has a mother, has a face, don't eat it. If it's coming from a car window, don't eat it. Like just simple things that start off the board, right? And eat more, eat more rainbow colored foods. We go over all that stuff, test the foods. These are the foods you have inflammatory issues. We avoid it, rotate it. These are nutritional deficiencies. Let's fix it. Eat more of these foods, right? Or take a supplement if you need to. Fix the microbiome if there's any kind of dysbiosis, leaky gut, etc. But the stress is still the hardest thing to overcome because we all can be doing great. We can exercise, we can do meditation, mindfulness, and all these outside extraneous factors, particularly now politically and financially, hits everybody. It's the whole country, right? Like literally one day people are like, oh my God, I just lost my retirement, I gotta be doing a lot more work like. So, and that just creates an inflammatory cascade again, right? So I think moving forward, we have to keep ahead. Like, so it's like making sure that you're getting all of these things as solid as you can, not perfection, but reducing that and being prepared because there's going to be more and more challenges, environmental challenges, financial challenges, political challenges ahead. That's going to affect everybody, regardless of what we're eating. And so we want to just stack up on the good areas. So make sure like, well, my heart disease in terms of my lipids and my blood sugar and my blood pressure is under control because there's other things that are still going to be aggravating those factors to potentially increase it. That's not necessarily a bad thing coming here, but a bad thing coming, mind and body as well.
Thanks.
Right.
Gabriel Cousins said that he recommends we have a teaspoon and a half a day of salt. And he said it's not table salt, it's like salt from a mineral bed that's very high quality, with 92 minerals in it, no microplastics, no explosions, really the highest quality. But he is saying that yes, we need a teaspoon and a half a day of this super high quality salt, followed by water. There are other people that have said salt is positive, and there's a bunch that have said don't have it. Do you, regarding strokes, heart disease, where do you each stand on this?
I'll let you go first.
Okay. So going back to, I've not found, so all salt, especially if it's a sea salt or a bed of salt that's coming from the ocean, has microplastics. That was the study that was just published. So I don't know where the secret is coming from. Interesting thing is, even when they're getting it from the mines, because that's where I like to get Himalayan salt, right? But so they actually found salt in the Himalayan mines. Like, well, how's this for Himalayan salt? But then when we dug deeper, is that they've done studies showing that the Himalayan, quote, I put this in quotes, that was coming from Pakistan, which is the source of it, that's contaminated sea salt with pink coloring, right? So there's layers of complexity to food adulteration now. It shouldn't really come from the mine itself, but there is also ways that they're processing that can be also plastic parts and things that are coming into the salt. But in terms of just culinary eating, just some Himalayan salt, which if you can get some really high quality that's coming from the mountain, not coming from Pakistan, India versus Pakistan, probably. That's beneficial. It has minerals and stuff like that. But I don't think you need to take it like a teaspoon, like directly for that spoke. We just use it culinary. Right now, too much salt, like table salt and all that, and from my perspective, I see it's causing blood pressure, swelling, particularly packaged salt that is in all frozen food, even vegan foods. That's just the universal cheap, preservative that increases all sorts of problems. And the people are getting way too much salt in packaged, processed, and particularly frozen foods across the board. We do see people we do something like called Soleil, which is that, that's what they use in Europe when people have low blood pressure, that they can take, and that's written in my book. I won't get into too much detail here because I don't want people to go and do these things. But, you can increase when people have low blood pressure to kind of bring it back to balance. And also people have high blood pressure, bring it down to balance. But that's the purposeful thing of doing it a specific way. It's not just taking a teaspoon of some kind of high quality salt. Now, Gabriel Cousens also is doing raw and doing fasting and all these other things. So there might be some reason for all that. But again, looking at the practicality, does the people that live the longest take a teaspoon of salt 3 times a day? I just look at it like going back to the people who live the longest and the healthiest. Are they doing what some of these providers are practicing? And if they're saying they're eating plant-based, yes. If they're doing a colonic, I don't not heard about that. I haven't. Are they doing coffee nibs? No. Are they doing tablespoon of salt or a teaspoon of salt 3 times a day? No. Is it potentially harmful? That jury can be out on that. He might have some data or some personal experience, but I have to look at like what's historically being used, and then what do we still see in the science today? And I don't think that they need to do that.
Yeah, I think that's great. And just, I mean, I think I just want to draw to everyone's attention that a teaspoon of salt typically is about 2,000 milligrams of nearly 2,000 milligrams of sodium, right? So you have to be careful really in the amount that you're consuming. Why? Well, we look at the impact on the endothelium. There's a great review article that came out. It wasn't looking specifically at pink Himalayan salt or other specifics. They just described it in terms of salt. They didn't specify, but looking at the impact and impairment of the endothelium and the triggering of various vascular phenomenon. So I do caution. I'm not saying that everyone who has is going to lead to heart failure or have kidney dysfunction and so forth, but I caution, and I think we want to make sure that as we plan, we analyze, we execute, plan, execute, analyze. In this analyzation, we're looking at what the literature tells us. I think literature, if there's literature to support a table and a half of a special salt, I'd love to read it and review it. You see what's that?
Teaspoon and a half.
Teaspoon and a half. Yeah. I'd love to read it in terms of the beneficial effects on the gut microbiome, the endothelium, cardiovascular health. I'd be very interested in taking a look at that. If it's anecdotal based on your experience, you don't have to have a research for everything. I think that still would be helpful. Look at
sorry to interrupt, but I would also say, like, when we teach people how to use food, like in preparation of food, salt is an important part of historical use. And there's documentaries on salt, right? And every culture and their salt mines and all, how we get these certain elements, trace elements in their body and flavorful for foods. But I always tell people, try to buy as many things that are with low salt or no salt, and then you can always add a little bit of culinary salt. You will always add less, by the way. So say someone's getting sunflower seeds, I tell them, get them no salted sunflower seeds, for example, and then because you will always put less, believe it or not. Even though it sounds like you're gonna put more, you actually put less than that it already comes packaged. So there's ways to actually get what you need, but reduce it. But I still like to use it more again. But then I'm a foodie, like I just cook. Like, why am I taking this like a plain thing, rather when I can make my food flavors and mixing the spiciness, the bitterness, the saltiness, the pungentness, the astringentness, the umaminess, right? Like, they don't talk about that. Oh yeah, because they're not cooking. They're just raw. Again, I'm eating with Columbus. Okay. I'm not going to brag about anybody else, but I just want to be honest. Like, there's a reason, like, again, the compliance is like this. If I'm living in a retreat center or I live on the land or something like that, and I have a place, that's one thing. I get it. But the average person that he sees in Southern California, the other person I see in Albuquerque or anywhere else around America, these are just out of our reach of our daily, like, compliance and activity or access or finances. It's just too much. And so we need to give something that's really applicable to the mass population that we can then move. Remember, it's a reduction. It's not perfection, but sometimes it becomes like, I think, too elitism, or too, like, you got, plant-based people do this or raw people do that. And it's like, if they want to do that, that's fine. But I don't find that raw people, when we test, because a lot of people come in, who are doing raw diets in my practice, their nutrients are super low. Because your microbiome over time, over evolution, has actually been eating food that's been cooked because we invented fire. People forget that. Historically, your microbiome has evolved to actually eat and process foods that have been cooked. So I understand why they want to get more nutrients, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean that you're getting all the nutrients that you think. And so I always tell people, put it to the test. You come in, they're raw. I got people who juice and do all these things. They're surprised because our microbiome is so unique. So I also don't want people to feel like it has to be so perfect. Everything has to be so like this. And they go, well, how come my test is not perfect? I'm like, because that's how life is. And you're not enjoying your food. You're stressing. You're trying to overcome and crush it or beat it or, fight with it. It's like this should be enjoying, should be nourishing, should bring happiness and community and conversation and lower disease. So anyways.
Okay. Thank you very much. Dr. Pai, how can someone stay in touch with you and follow up with you after this with your books and your website and your work?
So you can go to sanjevani.net, SANJEVANI.net to go to our clinic or our store to look up our book or any of the products like Bosmeric or my book in Inflammation Nation at Sanjevani Store, SANJEVANI store, store.com. And my book's available on Amazon. It's on Audible, or you can order it from our office, and I'd love to sign a copy for you guys. We're available also Wellness, WELLNSNESS, Wellness at sanjevani.net, SANJEVANI.net, or 505-821-6300 to make an appointment. I do consultations in person, and I also do telehealth health coaching sessions around the country and around the world. And we also are able to send testing kits and everything, and we can arrange and figure out how to do those things from afar.
Thank you very much, Dr. Batiste. How can we follow up with you, your books, your work? How do we stay in touch with you? Do you do consultations over the computer?
Well, first I have to say thank you for having me on. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and first opportunity to connect with Dr. Pai, and I've enjoyed our interaction this afternoon. I will tell you, so folks can follow me simply at drbatiste.com. That's DRBATISTE. My book, Selfish: A Cardiologist's Cure for a Stressed and Broken Heart, is available on Amazon, all the modalities, and Audible as well. I don't do virtual consultations at all, but I'd love to connect with you on Instagram. It's at The Healthy Heart Doc. We do speaking engagements. We do events through our nonprofit as well, which is Healthy Heart Nation, myhhn.org. And so this has been phenomenal. I'm encouraged by the number of participants who are on this broadcast right now. You're in the right place at the right time, and this discussion was meant for you.
Thank you both very much for sharing all your years of hard work to find this information out. And if we could unmute everyone so they could thank you as well.
Thank you, doctor. This is very helpful.
Satisfying
Thank
discussion.
you. Good job. Thank you.
Informative.
Presentation.
I love
One more.